Roll it. Roll it. Will you give me a clap in front of your face? Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Well, let's just pretend like we haven't met.
Yeah.
And let's just start, obviously tell me your name, but then let's get into some of your military history and as much as you want to cover there, and if there's anything specific.
Sure. So my name is Ian Benouis, and my military history begins with going to West Point. So I wanted to maximize my potential. I knew that in high school, that I'm like, where can I go? And I've got these smarts, I've got these skills, where can I go to kind of finishing school and manifest that stuff and really, try to realize my full potential. So West Point seemed to be the conduit to do that, where I could serve my country, get a good education, get some good leadership and discipline skills. And so I took that, and everyone, of course, out of West Point becomes a second lieutenant in the Army. And so I probably, like a lot of people, I wanted to go infantry to start, and then you find out how hard that is, and it's not quite as glamorous as TV and the movies have made it out to be. So I looked and I said, what's cool, but it's kind of high tech, and aviation seemed to be that pathway for me. So I graduated from West Point and then went to flight school for basically a year.
So was that right out of high school at 18, 19 years old into West Point?
Yeah, exactly. I was 17 years old. That was a big change.
What would you say about that West Point experience? What was the kind of the crux or the biggest thing that you felt like you got out of it? You mentioned leadership and kind of discipline aspects, but was there something you can pinpoint?
It's kind of like this big Stanford prison experiment. It's this crazy social experiment that you go through there, where you're super controlled in where you can be and what you can do. Kind of like the military at large, where you give up a lot of these rights ostensibly to go and do this thing that's protecting rights for other people. So I'd say the biggest thing I got out of it was sort of how to live and operate in a program, in a in a sort of matrix, as it were, because you knew on one level it's like, this is serious, this is real, it has real consequences from my actions, but at the same time it's a big game. It's this big social experiment, kind of like having people in prison for 4 years with a certain different set of rules. But yeah, so I think just understanding that this thing we do called life with other people is a big video game simulation matrix, and that's definitely helped me in my life.
Talk about maybe some of the camaraderie there and what happens, and maybe starting there at West Point and leading us into your military service then, because I know that's a big part of what goes on.
Sure, I think that the military in general provides this whole bonding experience through the difficulty of what you're doing together. So it's, you have a bonding experience if you're in a fraternity or a sorority in college, and this is just like that, super intense, on steroids, as it were. So you really bond with the other people that you're there with because of the intensity of the experience, and because you really need those other people to pull it off. The unofficial motto for the cadets was cooperate and graduate, and the only way you were going to make it through there, no matter how skilled or good or smart or anything or disciplined you were, was to work with other people. So you really come out of there with that bonding experience, just no different than somebody would serving in combat together, of just that intensity of the experience and depending on each other to get through. Again, in West Point, it's more like a video game where you can respawn, but in combat, of course, the consequences are quite binary if you don't pull it off. So.
Well, in that interesting part, because you mentioned you got to remove some of your personal rights to go to a place where you can bond with people to make this a group effort to whatever that may be, going into combat or just the camaraderie. That's an interesting aspect to me. I don't know if you have anything to kind of breaking yourself down to become part of a group.
Yeah, it's kind of a shamanic model in that way, similar to what someone would get into basic training, which is a shorter version of that. In this case, it's 4 years where they're going to break you down and build you back up to be a leader, right? So that you can lead other people as an officer in the military. And But exactly, but your identity isn't as an individual. It's your identity that they've broken you down and rebuilt you. So it's a schematic model, though, where you're part of this larger superorganism, you know. And yeah, that definitely works. The big challenge in the military is once you no longer have that structure, whether it's West Point or the Army or, you know, whatever in the military, what do you do then? Because you've been programmed and built to operate as part of the superorganism, and when that superorganism's taken away from you, it's really hard for a lot of people.
What can you describe what that is like a little bit? Like what that feeling might be like, or the emptiness, or the lack of whatever? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can just say, like, as a helicopter pilot, I wasn't really a helicopter pilot as much as I was the left or right hemisphere of this dragonfly-like bug that flew around in the middle of the night in Central America, you know, with other people on board. It operated different parts of this big thing. It never felt like, I'm a helicopter pilot. While you were doing it, it was completely psychedelic. You know, you're out flying around at 120 miles an hour, you know, in the jungle, looking through these night vision goggles. And yeah, it was, so when you're not doing that anymore and you've been programmed like that, you're like, what's my whole purpose for existence? What's the meaning here? I had this high level mission to, you know, save the planet, to protect, you know, for freedom, whatever kind of stuff, you know, you're looking at it. And when that's taken away, it's like you really don't have a mission anymore. And I think that's a big challenge for people coming back from wars. You know.
Well, back up just a touch. Yeah. And you coming out of West Point, you said that you went into flight school. Is that right?
Yeah.
Maybe you could just describe a little bit of that, and then you mentioned going down to Central America. Where did that lead you after into flight school and beyond into the military?
Yeah. So basically, flight school is about 9 months, and right before that, you do a short officer basic. But the real training, of course, is flight school itself. For us, coming from West Point, the officer basic was, you know, kind of a joke, frankly, but. It was necessary to bring everyone in and get everyone standardized. And flight school is 9 months. Back then we started in these little beach helicopters, you know, the little fish bowls. And then you transition to a Huey, and that's where we did most of our training. Now anyone going through flight school will be all in a Huey. And that was 9 months long. And so you're learning the basics of flying. You're learning how to fly instruments in sort of cloudy weather. You're learning how to fly at night. You know, night vision. In the Army, in the flight school, you don't really do night vision goggles. While I was there, a lot, just a little bit to get you exposed to it. And then, if you're going to fly a different aircraft, then you learn how to do that. So I actually was assigned to Fort Ord, California, and then immediately went out there, got a place to stay, and moved back to get my Black Hawk transition, which was 6 or 8 weeks. And then I was qualified to fly Black Hawk, and then I went back out to Fort Ord, joined my unit, and immediately, you know, began training and flying with my unit, and was only there a couple months before we got the initial deployment down to Panama. So yeah, so we deployed there in the spring of '87, a whole 2.5 years before Operation Just Cause actually happened.
Sir, can you describe a little bit about what that mission was? And I don't know how much detail you can go into.
Yeah. So it was basically a show of force mission. In that, first off, the Black Hawk unit on the ground in Panama could not keep enough of their aircraft properly maintained and flying. And they probably needed more aircraft out and about for the show of force mission. And really the show of force mission sort of, unbeknownst to us on a more conscious level, you kind of began to understand it on a subconscious level, was preparing for Just Cause. It was just basically a whole run-up for that impending operation.